Amaryllis by Edwin Arlington Robinson. Read for LibriVox.org by Winston Tharp. Once when I wandered in the woods alone, an old man tottered up to me and said, "Come, friend, and see the grave that I have made for Amaryllis." There was in the tone of his complaint such quaver and such moan that I took pity on him and obeyed, and long stood, looking where his hands had laid an ancient woman shrunk to skin and bone. Far out beyond the forest I could hear the calling of loud progress, and the bold incessant scream of commerce ringing clear. But though the trumpets of the world were glad, it made me lonely, and it made me sad to think that Amaryllis had grown old. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. Read by Linda Olsen Fitak for LibriVox.org. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know, in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I see the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night-tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the side of the sea. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Another Song by Samuel Daniel. Read for LibriVox.org by Phil Schempf. Are they shadows that we see? And can shadows pleasure give? Pleasures only shadows be cast by bodies we conceive, and are made the things we deem in those figures which they seem. But these pleasures vanish fast, which by shadows are expressed. Pleasures are not, if they last, in their passing is their best. Glory is most bright and gay in a flash, and so away. Feed apace, then, greedy eyes, on the wonder you behold. Take it sudden as it flies, though you take it not to hold. When your eyes have done their part, thought must length it in the heart. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Ant-Explorer by Clarence James Dennis. read4librivox.org by Algy. Once a little sugar ant made up his mind to roam, to fare away, far away, far away from home. He'd eaten all his breakfast, and he had his ma's consent to see what he could chance to see, and here's the way he went. Up and down a fern frond, round and round a stone, down a gloomy gully where he loathed to be alone, up a mighty mountain range 7 inches high, through the fearful forest grass that nearly hid the sky, out along a bracken bridge, bending in the moss, till he reached a dreadful desert that was feet and feet across. 'Twas a dry, deserted desert, and a trackless land to tread. He wished that he was home again and tucked up tight in bed. His little legs were wobbly, his strength was nearly spent, and so he turned around again, and here's the way he went. Back along a bracken bridge, bending in the moss, through the fearful forest grass shutting out the sky, up a mighty mountain range 7 inches high, down a gloomy gully where he loathed to be alone, up and down a fern frond, round and round a stone. A dreary ant, a weary ant, resolved no more to roam. He staggered up the garden path and popped back home. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. Babel, the Gate of the God, by Gordon Bottomley. Read for LibriVox.org by Algy. Lost towers impend, copeless primeval props of the new threatening sky, and first rude digits of awe, remonstrance, and uneasy power, thrust out by man when speech sank back in his throat. Then had the last rocks ended bubbling up, and rhythms of change within the heart begun, by a blind need that would make springs and winters. Pylons and monoliths went on by ages. Mycenae and great Zimbabwe came about. Cowed hearts in this conceived a pyramid that leaned to hold itself upright, a thing foredoomed to limits, death, and an easy apex. Then postulants for the stars' previous wisdom, standing on Carthage, must get nearer still, while in Chaldea, an altitude of God being mooted, and a saurian unearthed upon a mountain, stirring a surmise of floods and alterations of the sea, a round-walled tower must rise upon Sennaar temple, and escape to God the ascertained. These are decayed like Time's teeth in his mouth, black cavities and gaps, yet earth is darkened by their deep-sunken and unfounded shadows, and memories of man's earliest theme of towers. Space, the old source of time, should be undone, eternity defined, by men who trusted another tier would equal them with God. A city of grimed brick kilns, squat truncations, hunched like spread toads, yet high beneath their circles of low-packed smoke, assemblages of thunder that glowed upon their undersides by night, and lit like storm small shadowless workmen's toil. Meaningless stumps, upturned bare roots, remained in fields of mashy mud and trampled leaves, while, if a horse died hauling, plasterers knelt on a flank to clip its sweaty coat. A builder leans across the last wide courses, his unadjustable, unreaching eyes fail under him before his glances sink on the cloud's upper layers of sooty curls, where some long lightning goes like swallows downward, but at the wider gallery next below recognise master masons with pricked parchments. That builder then, as one who condescends unto the sea and all that is beneath him, his hairy breast on the wet mortar calls, "How many fathoms is it yet to heaven?" On the next eminence the orgulous king, Nimrod, stands up, conceiving he shall live to conquer God, now that he knows where God is. His eager hands push up the tower in thought. Again, his shaggy inhuman height strides down among the carpenters because he has seen one shape an eagle-woman on a doorpost. He drives his spear-beam through him for wasted day. Little men hurrying, running here and there, within the dark and stifling walls, dissent from every sound, and shoulder empty hods. The God's great altar should stand in the crypt among our earth's foundations. The God's great altar must be the last far coping of our work. It should inaugurate the broad main stair, or end it. It must stand toward the east. But here a grave contemptuous youth cries out, "Womanish babblers, how can we build God's altar ere we divine its foreordained true shape?" Then one, "It is a pedestal for deeds. 'Tis more, and should be hewn like the king's brow. It has the nature of a woman's bosom. The tortoise, first created, signifies it. A blind and rudimentary navel shows the source of worship better than horned moons." Then a lean giant, "Is not a calyx needful? Because round grapes on statues well expressed become the nadir of incense, nodal lamps. Yet apes have hands that butt, and carved red crystal. Birds' molten touchy talc veins, bronze buds crumble. Ublid ublai ganz ist rad eiger gaul." Words said too often seemed such ancient sounds that men forget them, or were lost in them. The guttural, glottis chasms of language reached a rhythm, a gasp, were curves of immortal thought. Man with his bricks was building, building yet, where dawn and midnight mingled and woke no birds. In the last courses, building past his knowledge a wall that swung. For towers can have no tops, no chord can meet the universal segment. Earth has not basis. Yet the yielding sky, invincible vacancy was there discovered, though piled up bricks should pulp the sappy bulks, weight generate a secrecy of heat, cankerous charring, crevices fronds of flame. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Barthram's Dirge by Robert Surtees. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. Barthram's Dirge. They shot him dead at the Nine-Stan Rig, beside the headless cross, and they left him lying in his blood upon the moor and moss. They made a bier of the broken bough, the sorch and the aspen grey, and they bore him to the Lady Chapel, and waked him there all day. A lady came to that lonely bower, and threw her robes aside. She tore her ling-lung yellow hair, and knelt at Barthram's side. She bathed him in the Lady Well, his wounds so deep and sere, and she plaited a garland for his breast, and a garland for his hair. They rolled him in a lily sheet, and bare him to his earth, and the Greyfriars sung the dead man's mass, as they passed the chapel garth. They buried him at the murk midnight, when the dew fell cold and still, when the aspen grey forgot to play, and the mist clung to the hill. They dug his grave but a barefoot deep, by the edge of the Nine-Stan burn, and they covered him over with the heather flower, the moss and the lady fern. A Greyfriar stayed upon the grave, and sang till the morning tide, and the friar shall sing for Barthram's soul, while the headless cross shall bide. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Bird Parliament, a 19th century translation by Edward Fitzgerald of the 12th century poem by the Persian Sufi mystic Farid ud-Din Attar, sometimes called Conference of the Birds. Read by Josh Mitteldorf. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Bird Parliament. Once on a time, from all the circles seven, between the steadfast earth and rolling heaven, the birds of all note, plumage, and degree, that float in air and roost upon the tree, and they that from the waters snatch their meat, and they that scour the desert with their long feet, birds of all natures, known or not to man, flocked from all quarters into full divan, on no less solemn business than to find or choose a Sultan Caliph of their kind, for whom, if never theirs or lost, they pined. The snake had his, 'twas said, and so the beast, his lion lord, and man had his at least, and that the birds who nearest were the skies, and went apparelled in its angel dyes, should be without, under no better law than that which lost all others in the maw, dispersed without a bond of union, nay, or meeting to make each upon the other's prey. This was the grievance, this the solemn thing, on which the scattered commonwealth of wing from all the four winds, flying to cloud, that met and blackened heaven, and thunder loud, with sound of whirring wings and beaks that clashed, down like a torrent on the desert dashed, till by degrees the hubbub and pell-mell into some order and precedence fell, and proclamation made of silence, each in special accent, but in general speech, that all should understand, and seemed him best the congregation of all wings addressed. And first, with heart so full as from his eyes ran weeping, uprose Tajidar the wise, the mystic mark upon whose bosom showed that he alone of all the birds the road had travelled, and the crown upon his head had reached the goal, and he stood forth and said, O birds, by what authority divine I speak, you know by his authentic sign, and name emblazoned on my breast and bill, whose counsel I assist at and fulfil. At his behest I measured as he planned the spaces of the air and sea and land. I gauged the secret sources of the springs, from cloud to fish the shadow of my wings dreamed over sleepy deluge, piloted the blast that bore Suleiman's throne, and led the clouds of birds that canopied his head, whose word I brought to Balkis, and I shared the counsel that with Asaph he prepared. And now you want a Caliph, and I know him, and his whereabouts, and how to go. And go alone I could, and plead your cause alone for all, but by the eternal laws, yourselves by toil and travel of your own must for your own delinquency atone. Were you indeed not blinded by the curse of self-exile that still grows worse and worse? Yourselves would know that, though you see him not, he is with you this moment, on this spot, your Lord through all forgetfulness and crime, here, there, and everywhere, and through all time. But as a father whom some wayward child by sinful self-will has unreconciled, waits till the sullen reprobate at cost of long repentance should regain the lost, therefore yourselves to see you as you were seen, yourselves must bridge the gulf you made between by such a search, and travel to be gone up to the mighty mountain Kaf whereon hinges the world, and round about whose knees into one ocean mingle the seven seas, in whose impenetrable forest folds of light and dark Simurg his presence holds, not to be reached, if to be reached at all, but by a road the stoutest might appall, of travel not of days or months, but years, lifelong perhaps, of dangers, doubts, and fears as yet unheard of, sweat of blood and brain, interminable, often all in vain, and if successful, no return again, a road whose very preparation scared the traveller who yet must be prepared, who then this travel to result must bring, needs both a lion's heart beneath the wing, and even more, a spirit purified of worldly passions, malice, lust, and pride, yea, even of worldly wisdom, which grows dim and dark the nearer it approaches him, who to the spirit's eye alone revealed by sacrifice of wisdom's self unsealed, without which none who reached the place could bear to look upon the glory dwelling there. One night from out the swarming city gate stepped holy Bajazid to meditate, alone amid the breathing fields that lay in solitary silence leagues away, beneath a moon and stars as bright as day, and the saint wondering such a temple were, and so lit up and scarce one worshipper. A voice from heaven amid the stillness said, "The royal road is not for all to tread, nor is the royal palace for the rout, who, even if they reach it, are shut out. The blaze that from my harem window breaks, with fright the rabble of the roadside takes, and even of those that at my portal din, thousands may knock for one that enters in." Thus spoke the Tajidar, and the winged crowd that underneath his word in silence bowed, clapped acclamation, and their hearts and eyes were kindled by the firebrand of the wise. They felt the degradation, they believed the word that told them how to be retrieved, and in that glorious consummation one forgot the cost at which it must be done. They only longed to follow, they would go whither he led, through flood or fire or snow. So cried the multitude, but some there were who listened with a cold disdainful air, content with what they were, or grudging cost of time or travel that might all be lost. These one by one came forward and preferred unwise objection, which the wiser word shot with direct reproof, or subtly round with argument and allegory wound. The pheasant first would know by what pretence the Tajidar to that preeminence was raised, a bird but for his lofty crest, and such the pheasant had, like all the rest, who answered, "By no virtue of my own Suleiman chose me, but by his alone, not by the gold and silver of my sighs made mine, but the free largesse of his eyes. Behold, the grace of Allah comes and goes, as to itself is good, and no one knows which way it turns in that mysterious court. Not he most finds who furthest travels for it. For one may crawl upon his knees lifelong, and yet may never reach, or all go wrong. Another, just arriving at the place he toiled for, and the door shut in his face. Whereas another, scarcely gone astride, and suddenly, behold, he is inside. But though the runner win not, he that stands, no thorn will turn to roses in his hands. Each one must do his best, and all endure, and all endeavour, hoping but not sure. Heaven is its own umpire, its bidding do, and thou perchance shalt be Suleiman's too. One day Shah Mahmud, riding with the wind a-hunting, left his retinue behind, and coming to a river whose swift course doubled back game and dog and man and horse, beheld upon the shore a little lad a-fishing, very poor and tatter-clad he was, and weeping as his heart would break. So the great Sultan, for good humour's sake, pulled in his horse a moment and drew nigh, and after making his salam asked why he wept. Weeping, the Sultan said, so sore as he had never seen one weep before. The boy looked up, and "O Amir," he said, "7 of us are at home, and father dead, and mother left with scarce a bit of bread. And now since sunrise have I fished, and see, caught nothing for our supper. Woe is me!" The Sultan lighted from his horse. "Behold," said he, "good fortune will not be controlled, and since today yours seems to turn from you, suppose we try for once what mine will do, and we will share alike in all I win." So the Shah took and flung his fortune in the net, which, cast by the great Mahmud's hand, 100 glittering fishes brought to land. The lad looked up in wonder. Mahmud smiled and vaulted into saddle, but the child ran after. "Nay, Amir, but half the whole is yours by bargain." "Nay, today take all," the Sultan cried, and shook his bridle free. "But mind, tomorrow all belongs to me, and so rode off. Next morning at divan the Sultan's mind upon his bargain ran, and being somewhat in a mind for sport, sent for the lad, who carried up to court, and marching into royalty's full blaze with such a catch of fish as yesterday's, the Sultan called and set him by his side, and asked him, "What luck?" The boy replied, "This is the luck that follows every cast, since o'er my net the Sultan's shadow passed." Then came the nightingale, from such a draught of ecstasy that from the rose he quaffed, reeling as drunk, and ever did distil in exquisite divisions from his bill, to inflame the hearts of men. And thus sang he, "To me alone, alone is given the key Of love, of whose whole mystery possessed. When I reveal a little to the rest, forthwith creation, listening, forsakes The reins of reason, and my frenzy takes. Yea, whosoever wants his quaint this wine, he leaves unlistened David's song for mine. In vain do men for my divisions strive, and die themselves making dead lutes alive. I hang the stars with meshes for men's souls. The garden underneath my music rolls The long, long morns that mourn the rose away. I sit in silence and on anguish pray, but the first air which the new year shall breathe Up to my boughs of message from beneath, that in her green harem my bride unveils, my throat bursts silence, and her advent hails, who in her crimson volume registers the notes of him whose life is lost on hers. The rose I love and worship now is here, if dying yet reviving year by year. But that you tell of all my life, why waste in vainly search, or if found, not taste? So with division infinite and trill, on would the nightingale have warbled still, and all the world have listened, but a note of sterner import checked the love-sick throat. O watering with thy melodious tears Love's garden, and who dost indeed the ears of men with thy melodious fingers mould, as David's finger iron did of old, why not, like David, dedicate thy dower of song to something better than a flower? Empress indeed of beauty, so they say, but one whose empire hardly lasts a day, by insurrection of this morning's breath, that made her hurried to decay and death, and while she lasts, contented to be seen and worshipped for the garden's only queen, leaving the singing on thy bough forlorn, or if she smile on thee, perhaps in scorn. Like that fond dervish waiting in the throng, when some world-famous beauty went along, who, smiling at the antic as she passed, forthwith staff, bead, and scrip away he cast, and grovelling in the kennel, took to whine before her door among the dogs and swine, which when she often went unheeding by, but one day quite as heedless asked him, why? He told of that one smile which all the rest passing had kindled hope within his breast. Again she smiled and said, O self-beguiled poor wretch, at whom and not on whom I smiled. Then came the subtle parrot in a coat greener than greensward, and about his throat a collar ran of subsulphurious gold, and in his beak a sugar plum he trolled, and all his words with luscious lisping ran, and to this tune: O cruel cage, and man more iron still, who did confine me there, who else with him whose livery I wear, ere this to his eternal fount had been, and drunk what should have kept me evergreen. But now I know the place, and I am free to go, and all the wise will follow me, some," and upon the nightingale one eye he leered, "for nothing but the blossom sigh, but I am for the luscious pulp that grows where and for which the blossom only blows, and which so long as the green tree provides, what better grows along Kaf's dreary sides, and what more needful profit there than he who gives me life to nip it from the tree?" To whom the Tajidar, O thou whose best in the green leaf of paradise is dressed, but whose neck kindles with a lower fire, O slip the collar off of base desire, and stand apparelled in heaven, woof entire. This life that hangs so sweet about your lips, but spite of all your keys are, slips and slips. What is it but itself the coarser rind of the true life within side and behind, which he shall never, never reach unto, till the gross shell or carcass he break through? For what said he, that dying hermit whom your prophet came to, trailing through the gloom his emerald's vest, and tempted, "Come with me and live"? The hermit answered, "Not with thee. 2 worlds there are, and this was thy design, and thou hast got it, but the next is mine, whose fount is this life's death, and to whose side even now I find my way without a guide." Then, like a sultan glittering in all rays of jewelry and decked with his own blaze, the glorious peacock swept into the ring, and turning slowly that the glorious thing might fill all eyes with wonder, thus said he: "Behold the secret artist making me, with no one colour of the skies bedecked, but from its angel's feather did select to make mine withal the Gabriel of all the birds. Though from my place I fell in Eden when acquaintance I did make, in those blessed days with that 7-headed snake, and thence with him my perfect beauty marred with these ill feet, was thrust out and debarred. Little I care for worldly fruit or flower, would you restore me to lost Eden's bower, but first my beauty making all complete, with reparation for these ugly feet. Were it, 'twas answered, only to return to that lost Eden, better far to burn in self-abasement up thy plumed pride, and even with lamer feet to creep inside. But all mistaken you, and all like you, that long for that lost Eden as the true, fair as it was, still nothing but the shade and outcourt of the majesty that made. That which I point you toward, and which the King I tell you of broods over with his wing, with no deciduous leaf, but with the rose of spiritual beauty smells and glows, no plot of earthly pleasance, but the whole true garden of the universal soul. For so creation's master jewel fell from that same Eden, loving which too well the work before the artist did prefer, and in the garden lost the gardener. Wherefore one day about the garden went a voice that found him in his false content, and like a bitter sarser of the north shrivelled the garden up and drove him forth into the wilderness. And so the eye of Eden closed on him till by and by. Then from a ruin where concealed he lay, watching his buried gold and hating day, hooted the owl. I tell you, my delight is in the ruin in the dead of night, where I was born and where I love to wone all my life long, sitting on some cold stone, away from all your roystering companies, in some dark corner where a treasure lies, that buried by some miser in the dark speaks up to me at midnight like a spark, and over it like a talisman I brood, companion of the serpent and the toad. What need of other sovereigns, having found and keeping as in prison underground, one before whom all other kings bow down, and with his glittering heel their foreheads crown? He that a miser lives and miser dies, at the last day what figure shall he rise? A fellow all his life lived hoarding gold, and dying hoarded left it. And behold, one night his son saw peering through the house a man with yet the semblance of a mouse, watching a crevice in the wall, and cried, "My father?" "Yes," the Mussulman replied. "Thy father? But why watching thus?" "For fear, lest any smell my treasure buried here." "But wherefore, sir, so metamousified?" "Because, my son, such is the true outside of the inner soul by which I lived and died." "Ay," said the partridge with his foot and bill, crimson with raking rubies from the hill, and clattering his spurs, "wherewith the ground I stab," said he, for rubies that, when found, I swallow, which, as soon as swallowed, turn to sparks, which, though my beak and eyes do burn, gold, as you say, is but dull metal dead, and hanging on the hoarder's soul like lead. But rubies that have blood within, and grown and nourished in the mountain heart of stone, burn with an inward light, which they inspire, and make their owners lords of their desire. To whom the Tajidar, as idly sold to the quick pebble as the drowsy gold, as dead when sleeping in their mountain mine, as dangerous to him who makes them shine, slavish indeed to do their lord's commands, and slave-like aptest to escape his hands, and serve a second master like the first, and working all their wonders for the worst. Never was jewel after or before like that Suleiman for a signet wore, whereby one ruby, weighing scarce a grain, did sea and land and all therein constrain. Yea, even the winds of heaven made the fierce East bear his league-wide pavilion like a beast, whither he would. Yea, the good angel held his subjects, and the lower fiend compelled, till, looking round about him in his pride, he overtaxed the fountain that supplied, praying that after him no son of clay should ever touch his glory. And one day Almighty God his jewel stole away, and gave it to the Div, who with the ring wore also the resemblance of the king, and so for 40 days played such a game as blot Suleiman's 40 years with shame. Then the Shah Falcon, tossing up his head, blink-hooded as it was, "Behold," he said, "I am the chosen comrade of the king, and perch upon the fist that wears the ring. Born, bred, and nourished in the royal court, I take the royal name and make the sport. And if strict discipline I undergo, and half my life am blinded, be it so, because the Shah's companion ill may brook on aught save royal company to look. And why am I to leave my king, and fare with all these rabble wings I know not where?" "O blind indeed," the answer was, "and dark to any but a vulgar mortal mark, and drunk with pride of vassalage to those whose humour, like their kingdom, comes and goes, all mutability, who one day please to give, and next day what they gave not seize, like to the fire a dangerous friend at best, which who keeps farthest from does wiseliest." A certain Shah there was in days foregone, who had a lovely slave he doted on, and cherished as the apple of his eye, clad gloriously, fed sumptuously, set high, and never was at ease were he not by, who yet, for all this sunshine day by day, was seen to wither like a flower away, which, when observing, one without the veil of favour asked the favourite, "Why so pale and sad?" Thus sadly answered the poor thing, "No sun that rises sets until the king, whose archery is famous among men, aims at an apple on my head. And when the stricken apple splits, and those who stand around cry, 'Lo, the Shah's unerring hand!' then he too, laughing, asks me, 'Why so pale and sorrowsome?' As could the Sultan fail, who such a master of the bow confessed, and aiming by the head that he loves best?" Then on a sudden swooped the Phoenix down, as though he wore as well as gave the crown, and cried, "I care not I to wait on kings, whose crowns are but the shadow of my wings." "Ay," was the answer, "and pray how has sped on which it lighted many a mortal head?" A certain Sultan dying, his Vizier in dream beheld him, and in mortal fear began, "O mighty Shah of Shahs, thrice blessed," but loud the vision shrieked and struck its breast, and "Stab me not with empty title," cried, "One only Shah there is, and none beside, who from his throne above for certain ends a while some spangle of his glory lends to men on earth, but calling in again exacts a strict accounting of every grain. Sultan I lived, and held the world in scorn. O better had I gleaned the field of corn, O better had I been a beggar born, and for my throne and crown down in the dust my living head had laid where dead I must. Oh, withered, withered, withered be the wing whose overcasting shadow made me king. Then from a pond where all day long he kept waddled the dapper duck, demure, adept at infinite ablution, and precise in keeping of his raiment clean and nice. And sure of all the race of birds, said he, none for religious purity like me. Beyond what strictest rituals prescribed, methinks I am the saint of all our tribe, to whom by miracle the water that I wash in also makes my praying mat. To whom more angrily than all replied the leader, lashing that religious pride, that under ritual obedience to outer law with inner might dispense. For fair as all the feather to be seen, could one see through the maw was not so clean. But he that made both maw and feather too would take account of seeing through and through. A Shah, returning to his capital, his subjects dressed it forth in festival, thronging with acclamation square and street, and kneeling flung before his horse's feet jewel and gold, all which with scarce an eye the Sultan superciliously rode by, till coming to the public prison, they who dwelt within those grisly walls, by way of welcome, having neither pearl nor gold, over the wall chopped head and carcass rolled, some almost parched to mummery with the sun, some wet with execution, that day done. At which grim compliment at last the Shah drew bridle, and amid a wild hurrah of savage recognition, smiling threw silver and gold among the wretched crew, and so rode forward, whereat of his train one wondering that, while others sued in vain with costly gifts which carelessly he passed, but smiled at ghastly welcome like the last, the Shah made answer, all that pearl and gold of ostentatious welcome only told a little with great clamour from the store of hypocrites who kept at home much more. But when those severed heads and trunks I saw, save by strict execution of my law they had not parted company, not one but told my will, not talked but done. Then from a wood was heard unseen to coo the ring-dove, Yusuf, 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 you, for thus her sorrow broke her note in twain, and just where broken took it up again. Suf, Yusuf, 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 but one note which still repeating she made hoarse her throat, till checked. O you who with your idle sighs block up the road of better enterprise, sham sorrow all, or bad as sham if true. When once the better thing is come to do, beware lest wailing thus you meet his doom, who all too long his darling wept, from whom you draw the very name you hold so dear, and which the world is somewhat tired to hear. When Yusuf from his father's home was torn, the patriarch's heart was utterly forlorn, and like a pipe with but one stop, his tongue with nothing but the name of Yusuf rung. Then down from heaven's branches flew the bird of heaven, and said, God wearies of that word. Hast thou not else to do and else to say? So Jacob's lips were sealed from that day. But one night in a vision, far away, his darling in some alien field he saw, binding the sheaf, and what between the awe of God's displeasure and the bitter pass of passionate affection sighed, Alas! and stopped. But with the morning sword of flame that opened his eyes, the sterner angels came. For the forbidden word, not uttered by thy lips, was yet sequestered in that sigh, and the right passion, whose excess was wrong, blinded the ancient eyes that wept too long. And after these came others, arguing, inquiring, and excusing, some one thing and some another, endless to repeat, but in the main sloth, folly, or deceit. Their souls were to the vulgar figure cast of earthly victual, not of heavenly fast. At last one smaller bird, of a rare kind, of pure modest plume and unpresumptuous mind, whispered, O Tajidar, We know indeed how thou best knoweth, and wouldst help our need. For thou art wise and holy, and hast been behind the veil, and there the presence seen. But we are weak and vain, with little care beyond our yearly nests and daily fare. How should we reach the mountain? And if there, how get so great a prince to hear our prayer? For there, you say, dwells the Simurgh alone, in glory like Suleiman on his throne, and we but pismirs at his feet. Can he such puny creatures stoop to hear or see, or hearing, seeing, own us, unakin as he to folly, woe, and death, and sin? To whom the Tajidar, whose voice for those bewildered ones to full compassion rose, O lost so long in exile, you disclaim the very fount of being whence you came, cannot be parted from, and, will or no, whether for good or evil, must reflow. For look, the shadows into which the light of his pure essence down by infinite gradation dwindles, which at random play through space and shape and definite, one ray of his creative will into defined creation quickens. We that swim the wind, and they the flood below, and man and beast that walk between, from lion to the least pismir that creeps along Suleiman's wall, yea, that in which they swim, fly, walk, and crawl, however near the fountain light or far removed, yet his authentic shadows are dead matter's self, but the dark residue exterminating glory dwindles too. A mystery too fearful in the crowd to utter, scarcely to thyself aloud, but when in solitary watch and prayer considered and religiously beware, lest thou the copy with the type confound, and deity with deity indrowned. For as pure water into purer wine incorporating shall itself reline, while the dull drug lies half resolved below, with him and with his shadow is it so. The baser forms, to whatsoever change subject, still vary through their lower range, to which the higher even shall decay, that letting ooze their better part away for things of sense and matter, in the end shall merge into the clay to which they tend. Unlike to him who, straining through the bond of outward being for a life beyond, while the gross worldling to his centre clings, that draws him deeper in, exulting springs to merge him in the central soul of things. And shall not he pass home with others' zest, who with full knowledge yearns for such a rest, than he who with his better self at strife drags on the weary exile called this life? One, like a child with outstretched arms and face upturned, anticipates his sire's embrace. The other, crouching like a guilty slave till flogged to punishment across the grave, and knowing that his glory ill can bear the unpurged eye, do thou thy breast prepare, and the mysterious mirror he set there to temper his reflected image in, clear of distortion, doubleness, and sin. And in thy conscience, understanding this, the double only seems, but the one is. Thyself to self-annihilation give, that this false two in that true one may live. For this I say, if looking in thy heart thou for self-whole mistake thy shadow part, that shadow part indeed into the sun shall melt. But in that mirror, if with purged eyes thy shadow thou for shadow recognize, then shalt thou back into thy centre fall, a conscious ray of that eternal All. He ceased, and for a while amazement quelled the host, and in the chain of silence held a mystery so awful. Who would dare so glorious, who would not wish to share? So silence brooded on the feathered folk, till here and there a timid murmur broke, from some too poor in honest confidence, and then from others of too much pretence, whom both, as each unduly hoped or feared, the Tajidar in answer checked or cheered. Some said their hearts were good indeed to go the way he pointed out, but they were slow of comprehension, and scarce understood their present evil or the promised good. And so, though willing to do all they could, must not they fall short or go wholly wrong on such mysterious errand, and so long? Whom the wise leader bid but do their best in hope and faith, and leave to him the rest. For he who fixed the race and knew its length and danger also knew the runner's strength. Shah Mahmud, absent on an enterprise, Ayas, the very darling of his eyes, at home under an evil eye fell sick. Then cried the Sultan to a soldier, "Quick! To horse, without a moment's stay! The shortest road with all the speed you may, or by the Lord your head shall pay for it." Off went the soldier, plying spur and bit, over the sandy desert, over green valley and mountain, and the stream between, without a moment's stop for rest or bait, up to the city, to the palace gate, up to the presence chamber at a stride, and lo, the Sultan at his darling's side. Then thought the soldier, "I have done my best, and yet shall die for it." The Sultan guessed his thought and smiled. "Indeed, your best you did, the nearest road you knew, and well you rid. And if I knew a shorter, my excess of knowledge does but justify thy less." So then with drooping crest and feather came others, bowed down with penitence and shame. They longed indeed to go, but how begin, meshed and entangled as they were in sin, which oftentimes repentance of past wrong, as often broken, had but knit more strong. Whom the wise leader bid be of good cheer, and, conscious of the fault, dismiss the fear. Not at the very entrance of the fray their weapon, even if broken, fling away, since mercy on the broken branch anew would blossom were but each repentance true. For did not God his prophet take to task? 7 times of thee did Karun pardon ask, which, hadst thou been like me his maker, yea, but present at the kneading of the clay, with those twain elements of hell and heaven, one prayer had won what thou deniest to 7. For like a child sent with a fluttering light to feel his way along a gusty night, man walks the world again and yet again. The lamp shall be by fits of passion slain, and shall not he who sent him from the door relight the lamp once more and yet once more? When the rebellious host from death shall wake black with despair of judgment, God shall take ages of holy merit from the count of angels to make up man's short amount, and bid the murmuring angel gladly spare of that which, undiminishing his share of bliss, shall rescue thousands from the cost of bankruptcy within the prison lost. Another story told how in the scale goodwill beyond mere knowledge would prevail. In Paradise the angel Gabriel heard the lips of Allah trembling with the word of perfect acceptation, and he thought, some perfect faith, some perfect answer wrought, but whose, and wherewith slipping from the crypt of Sidra through the angel ranks has slipped, watching what lip yet trembled with his shot, that so had hit the mark, but found it not. Then in a glance to earth he threaded through mosque, palace, cell, and cottage of the true belief in vain, so back to heaven he went, and Allah's lips still trembling with assent. Then the tenacious angel once again threaded the ranks of heaven and earth in vain, till once again returned to Paradise. There, looking into God's, the angel's eyes beheld the prayer that brought that benison, rising like incense from the lips of one who to an idol bowed, as best he knew, under that false god worshipping the true. And then came others whom the summons found, not wholly sick indeed, but far from sound, whose light and constant soul alternate flew from saint to sinner, and to both untrue, who like a niggard tailor tried to match truth's single garment with a worldly patch, a dangerous game, for striving to adjust the hesitating scale of either lust, that which had least within it upward flew, and still the weightier to the earth down drew, and while suspended between rise and fall, apt with a shaking hand to forfeit all. There was a queen of Egypt, like the bride of night, full moon-faced and canopus-eyed, whom one among the meanest of her crowd loved, and she knew it, for he loved aloud, and sent for him and said, Thou lov'st thy queen, now therefore thou hast this to choose between. Fly for thy life, or for this one night wed thy queen, and with the sunrise lose thy head. He paused. He turned to fly. She struck him dead. For had he truly loved his queen, said she, he would at once have given his life for me, and life and wife had carried, but he lied, and loving only life, he justly died. And then came one who, having cleared his throat with sanctimonious sweetness in his note, thus lisped, Behold, I languish from the first with passionate and unrequited thirst of love for more than any mortal bird. Therefore have I withdrawn me from the herd to pine in solitude. But thou at last hast drawn a line across the dreary past, and sure I am by foretaste that the wine I longed for and thou tellest of shall be mine. But he was sternly checked. I tell thee this, such boast is no assurance of such bliss. Thou canst not even fill the sail of prayer unless from him breathe that authentic air that shall lift up the curtain that divides his lover from the harem where he hides. And the fulfilment of thy vows must be not from thy love for him, but his for thee. The third night after Bajazid had died, one saw him in a dream at his bedside, and said, Thou Bajazid, tell me, O pyre, how fared it there with Munkar and Nakir? And Bajazid replied, When from the grave they met me rising, and if Allah's slave asked me, or collared with the chains of hell, I said, Not I, but God alone can tell. My passion for his service were but fond ambition, had not he approved the bond. Had he not round my neck the collar thrown, and told me in the number of his own, and that he only knew, what signifies 100 years of prayer if none replies? But, said another, then shall none the seal of acceptation on his forehead feel, ere the grave yield them on the other side where all is settled? But the chief replied, Enough for us to know that who is meet shall enter, and with unreproved feet, even as he might upon the waters walk, the presence room and in the presence talk, with such unbridled license as shall seem to the uninitiated to blaspheme. Just as another Holy Spirit fled, the skies above him burst into a bed of angels, looking down and singing clear, Nightingale, nightingale, thy rose is here. And yet the door wide open to that bliss, as some hot lover slights a scanty kiss, the saint cried, All I sighed for come to this? I who lifelong have struggled, Lord, to be not of thy angels one, but one with thee. Others were sure that all he said was true. They were extremely wicked, that they knew, and much they longed to go at once, but some, they said, so unexpectedly had come, leaving their nests half built in bad repair, with children in, themselves about to pair. Might he not choose a better season, nay, perhaps a year or two's delay, till all was settled and themselves more stout and strong to carry their repentance out? And then, the same or like excuse, with hardened heart and resolution loose, with dallying and old age itself engaged, still to shirk that which shirking we have aged. And so with self-delusion till, too late, death upon all repentance shuts the gate, or some fierce blow compels the way to choose, and forced repentance half its virtues lose. As of an aged Indian king they tell, who, when his empire with his army fell, under young Mahmud's sword of wrath was sent at sunset to the conqueror in his tent, but ere the old king's silver head could reach the ground, was lifted up with kindly speech, and with so holy mercy reassured that after due persuasion he abjured his idols, sate upon Mahmud's divan, and took the name and faith of Musulman. But when the night fell, in his tent alone, the poor old king was heard to weep and groan, and smite his bosom, which when Mahmud knew, he went to him and said, Lo, if thou rue thy lost dominion, thou shalt wear the ring of thrice as large a realm. But the dark king still wept, and ashes on his forehead threw, and cried, Not for my kingdom lost I rue, but thinking how at the last day will stand the prophet with the volume in his hand, and ask of me, How was it that in thy day of glory thou didst turn from me, and slay my people, but soon as thy infidel before my true believers' army fell, like corn before the reaper, thou didst own his sword who scoutest me, of seed so sown, what profitable harvest should be grown? Then, after cheering others who delayed not of the road but of themselves afraid, the Tajidar the troop of those addressed whose uncomplying attitude confessed their souls entangled in the old deceit, and hankering still after forbidden meat. O ye who, so long feeding on the husk, forego the fruit, and doting on the dusk of the false dawn, are blinded to the true, that in the Maidan of this world pursue the golden ball which, driven to the goal, wins the world's game but loses your own soul. Or like to children after bubbles run, that still elude your fingers, or if one burst in derision at your touch, all thin glitter without, and empty wind within. So as a prosperous worldling on the bed of death, Behold, I am as one, he said, who all my life long have been measuring wind, and dying now, leave even that behind. This world's a nest in which the cockatrice is warmed and hatched of vanity and vice, a false bazaar whose wares are all a lie, or never worth the price at which you buy. A many-headed monster that, supplied the faster is unsatisfied. So as one, hearing a rich fool one day to God for yet one other blessing pray, bid him no longer bounteous heaven tire, for life to feed, but death to quench the fire. And what are all the vanities and wiles on which the false world decks herself and smiles, to draw men down into her harlot lap? Lusts of the flesh, that soul and body sap, and melting soul down into carnal lust, even that for which 'tis sacrifice disgust. Or lust of worldly glory, hollow more than the drum beaten at the Sultan's door, and fluctuating with the breath of man, as the vain banner flapping in the van. And lust of gold, perhaps of lust the worst, the miscreated idol most accursed, that between man and him who made him stands, the felon that with suicidal hands he sweats to dig and rescue from his grave, and sets at large to make himself its slave. For lo, to what worse than oblivion gone are some the cozening world most doted on. Pharaoh tried glory, and his chariots drowned. Charon with all his gold went underground. Down toppled Nembroth with his airy stare. Shedad among his roses lived, but where? And as the world upon her victims feeds, so she herself goes down the way she leads. For all her false allurements are the threads the spider from her entrail spins and spreads for home and hunting ground, and by darts at due signal on the tangled fly, seizes diswings and drains the life, and leaves the swinging carcass, and forthwith reweaves her web, each victim adding to the store of poisoned entrail to entangle more. And so she bloats in glory, till one day the master of his house, passing that way, perceives, and with one flourish of his broom of web and fly and spider clears the room. Behold, dropped through the gate of mortal birth, the nightly soul alights from heaven on earth, begins his race, but scarce the saddle feels, when a foul imp up from the distance steals, and double as he will about his heels, closer and ever closer circling creeps, then half invited on the saddle leaps, clings round the rider, and once there, in vain the strongest strives to thrust him off again. In childhood just peeps up the blade of ill that youth to lust rears, fury and self-will, and as man cools to sensual desire, ambition catches with as fierce a fire, until old age sends him with one last lust of gold to keep it where he found, in dust. Life at both ends, so feeble and constrained, how should that imp of sin be slain or chained? And woe to him who feeds the hateful beast, that of his feeder makes an after-feast. We know the wolf by stratagem and force can hunt the tiger down, but what resource against the plague we heedless hatch within? Then, growing pamper into full-blown sin with the soul's self, even as the wise man said, feeding the very devil with God's own bread, until the Lord his largesse misapplied resent, and drive us wholly from his side. For should the greyhound whom a sultan fed, and by a jewelled string a hunting led, turn by the way to gnaw some nasty thing, and snarl at him who twitched the silken string, would not his lord soon weary of dispute, and turn adrift the incorrigible brute? Nay, would one follow, and without a chain, the only master truly worth the pain, one must beware lest, growing over-fond of even life's most consecrated bond, we clog our footsteps to the world beyond. Like that old Arab chieftain who confessed his soul by two darling things possessed, that only son of his, and that one colt descended from the prophet's thunderbolt. And I might well bestow the last, he said, on him who brought me word the boy was dead. And if so vain the glittering fish we get, how doubly vain to dote upon the net called life, that draws them, patching up this thin tissue of breathing out and breathing in, and so by husbanding each wretched thread spin out death's very terror that we dread. For as the raindrop from the sphere of God dropped for a while into the mortal clod, so little makes of its allotted time back to its heaven itself to resublime, that it but serves to saturate its clay with bitterness that will not pass away. One day the prophet on a river bank, dipping his lips into the channel, drank a draught as sweet as honey. Then there came one who an earthen pitcher from the same drew up and drank, and after some short stay under the shadow, rose and went his way, leaving his earthen bowl, in which anew thirsting the prophet from the river drew, and drank from, but the water that came up, sweet from the stream, drank bitter from the cup. At which the prophet, in a still surprise, for answer turning up to heaven his eyes, the vessel's earthen lips with answer ran, "The clay that I am made of once was man, who dying and resolved into the same obliterated earth from which he came, was for the potter dug and chased in turn, through long vicissitude of bowl and urn. But howsoever moulded, still the pain of that first mortal anguish would retain, and cast and recast for 1,000 years would turn the sweetest water into tears. And after death, that shirk it as we may, will come, and with it bring its after day. For even Yusuf, when his brotherhood came up from Egypt to buy corn, and stood before their brother in his lofty place, nor knew him, for a veil before his face struck on his mystic cup, which straightway then wrung out their story to those guilty 10, not to them only, but to every one, whatever he have said and thought and done, unburied with the body shall fly up and gather into heaven's inverted cup, which, stricken by God's finger, shall tell all the story whereby we must stand or fall. And though we walk this world as if behind there were no judgment, or the judge half blind, beware, for he with whom we have to do outsees the link, outlives the phoenix too. So Sultan Mahmud, coming face to face with mightier numbers of the swarthy race, vowed that if God to him the battle gave, God's dervish people all the spoil should have. And God the battle gave him, and the fruit of a great conquest coming to compute, a murmur through the Sultan's army stirred, lest ill committed to one hasty word, the Shah should squander on an idle brood what should be theirs who earned it with their blood, or go to fill the coffers of the state. So Mahmud's soul began to hesitate, till looking round in doubt from side to side, a raving zealot in the press he spied, and called and had him brought before his face, and telling, bid him arbitrate the case, who, having listened, said, The thing is plain, if thou and God should never have again to deal together, rob him of his share, but if perchance you should, why then beware. So spake the Tajidar, but fear and doubt among the birds in whispers went about. Great was their need, and succour to be sought at any risk, at any ransom bought. But such a monarch greater than Mahmud the Great himself, why, how should he be wooed to listen to them? They too have come, oh, suddenly and unprepared from home, with any gold or jewel or rich thing to carry with them to so great a king. Poor creatures, with the old and carnal blind, spite of all said, so thick upon the mind, devising how they might ingratiate access as to some earthly potentate. Let him that with his monarch would engage bring the gold dust of a long pilgrimage, the ruby of a bleeding heart, whose sighs breathe more than amber incense as it dies, and while in naked beggary he stands, hope for the robe of honour from his hands. And as no gift this sovereign receives, save the mere soul and self of him who gives, so let the soul for other none reward look than the presence of its sovereign Lord. And as his hearers seemed to estimate their scale of glory from Mahmud the Great, a simple story of the Sultan told, how best a subject with his Shah made bold. One night Shah Mahmud, who had been of late somewhat distempered with affairs of state, strolled through the streets disguised as wont to do, and coming to the baths, there on the flue saw the poor fellow who the furnace fed, sitting beside his water jug and bread. Mahmud stepped in, sat down, unasked, took up and tasted of the untasted loaf and cup, saying within himself, Grudge but a bit, and by the Lord your head shall pay for it. So having rested, warmed and satisfied himself without a word on either side, at last the wayward Sultan rose to go, and then at last his host broke silence. So, art satisfied? Well, brother, any day or night remember when you come this way and want a bit of provender, why, you are welcome, and if not, why, welcome too. The Sultan was so tickled with the whim of this quaint entertainment and of him who offered it, that many a night again Stoker and Shah foregathered in that vein, till the poor fellow having stood the test of true good fellowship, Mahmud confessed one night the Sultan that had been his guest, and in requital of the scanty dole the poor man offered with so large a soul, bid him ask any largesse that he would, a throne if he would have it, so he should. The poor man kissed the dust, and all, said he, I ask is, what and where I am to be. If I but the Shah from time to time will come, as now, and see me in the lowly home, his presence makes a palace, and my own poor flue more royal than another's throne. So said the cheery tale, and as they heard, again the heart beneath the feathers stirred, again forgot the danger and the woes of the long travel in its glorious close. Here truly all was poverty, despair, and miserable banishment, but there, that more than Mahmud, for no more than prayer, who would restore them to their ancient place, and round their shoulders fling his robe of grace. They clapped their wings, on fire to be assayed, and prove of what true metal they were made, although defaced and wanting the true ring and superscription of their rightful king. The road, in countless voices cried the host, the road, and who shall be our guide? And they themselves, the Tajidar, replied. Yet to make doubly certain that the voice of heaven according with the people's choice, lots should be drawn, and he on whom should light heaven's hand, they swore to follow him outright. This settled, and once more the hubbub quelled, once more suspense the host in silence held, while tribe by tribe the birds their fortune drew, and lo, upon the Tajidar it flew. Then, rising up again in wide and high circumference of wings that meshed the sky, the Tajidar, they cry, the Tajidar, with him was heaven, and they would follow life and limb. Then, once more fluttering to their places down, upon his head they set the royal crown, as Caliph of their Caliph, so long lost, and captain of his now repentant host. And setting him on high and silence called, the Tajidar in pulpit throne installed, his voice into a trumpet tongue so clear, as all the winged multitude should hear raised, to proclaim the order and array of march, which many as it frightened, yea, the heart of multitudes at outset broke, yet for due preparation must be spoke. A road indeed that never wing before flew, nor foot trod, nor heart imagined, o'er waterless deserts, waters where no shore, valleys comprising cloud-high mountains, these again their valleys deeper than the seas, whose dust all adders, and whose vapours fire, where all once hostile elements conspire, to set the soul again herself, and tear courage to terror, hope into despair, and madness, terrors, trials to make stray or stop where death to wander or delay, where when half dead with famine, toil and heat, 'twas death indeed to rest or drink or eat. A road still waxing in self-sacrifice, as it went on, still ringing with the cries and groans of those who had not yet prevailed, and bleaching with the bones of those who failed, where almost all withstood, perhaps to earn nothing, and earning never to return. And first the veil of search, an endless maze, branching into innumerable ways, all courting entrance, but one right, and this beset with pitfall, gulf, and precipice, where dust is embers, air a fiery sleet, through which, with blinded eyes and bleeding feet, the pilgrim stumbles with hyena's howl, around and hissing snake, and deadly ghoul, whose prey he falls if tempted but to droop, or if to wander famished from the troop, for fruit that falls to ashes in the hand, water that reached recedes into the sand. The only word is forward, guide in sight, after him swerving neither left nor right, thyself for thine own victual by day, at night thine own self's caravanserai, till suddenly, perhaps when most subdued and desperate, the heart shall be renewed, when deep in utter darkness by one gleam of glory from the far remote Harim, that with a scarcely conscious shock of change shall light the pilgrim toward the mountain range of knowledge, where if stronger and more pure the light and air, yet harder to endure, and if perhaps the footing more secure, harder to keep up with a nimble guide, less from lost road than insufficient stride, yet tempted still by false show from the track, and by false voices called aside or back, which echo from the bosom, as if won the journey's end when only just begun, and not a mountain peak with toil attained, but shows a top yet higher to be gained. Wherefore still forward, forward, love that fired thee first to search, by search is so re-inspired, as that the spirit shall the carnal load burn up, and double wing thee on the road, that wert thou knocking at the very door of heaven, thou still would cry for more, 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 till loom in sight Calf's mountain peak, a shroud in mist, uncertain yet mountain or cloud, But where the pilgrim 'gins to hear the tide Of that one sea in which the seven subside, and not the seven seas only, but the seven and self-unfolding spheres of earth and heaven, yea, the two worlds that now as pictures sleep upon its surface, but whence once the deep from its long slumbers 'gins to heave and sway under the tempest, shall be swept away, with all their phases and phenomena, not senseless matter only, but combined with life in all varieties of kind, yea, even the abstract form that space and time men call, and weal and woe, virtue and crime, and all the several creeds, like those who fell before them, Mussulman and infidel, shall from the face of being melt away, cancelled and swept as dreams before the day. So hast thou seen the astrologer prepare his mystic tables smooth of sand, and there inscribe his mystic figures, square and trine, circle and pentagram, and heavenly sign, of stars and planet, from whose set and rise, meeting in difference, he prophesies, and having done it with his finger clean, obliterates as never they had been. Such is, when reached, the table-land of one and wonder, blazing with so fierce a sun of unity that blinds while it reveals the universe that to a point congeals. So stunned with utter revelation reels the pilgrim, when that double-seeming house, against whose beams he long had chafed his brows, crumbles and cracks before that sea, whose near and nearer voice now overwhelms his ear, till blinded, deafened, maddened, drunk with doubt of all within himself as all without, nay, whether a without there be or not, or a within that doubts, and if, then what? Even so shall the bewildered pilgrim seem when nearest waking, deepliest in dream, and darkest next to dawn, and lost what had when all is found, and just when sane quite mad, as one that having found the key once more returns, and lo, he cannot find the door. He stumbles over, so the pilgrim stands a moment on the threshold with raised hands, calls to the eternal Saki for one draught of light from the one essence, which, when quaffed, he plunges headlong in, and all is well with him who never more returns to tell. Such being then the race and such the goal, judge if you must not body both and soul with meditation, watch and fast prepare. For he that wastes his body to a hair shall seize the locks of truth, and he that prays good angels in their ministry waylays, and the midnightly watcher in the folds of his own darkness God Almighty holds. He that would prosper here must from him strip the world, and take the dervish gown and scrip, and as he goes must gather from all sides irrelevant ambitions, lusts and prides, glory and gold and sensual desire, whereof to build the fundamental pyre of self-annihilation, and cast in all old relations and regards of kin and country, and the pile with this perplexed world platformed from the fables of the next, raise it toward culmination with the torn rags and integuments of creeds outworn, and top the giddy summit with the scroll of reason that in dingy smoke shall roll over the true self-sacrifice of soul. For such a prayer was his, O God, do thou with all my wealth in the other world endow my friends, and with my wealth in this my foes, till bankrupt in thy riches I repose. Then all the pile completed of the pelf of either world as last thrown on thyself, and with the torch of self-negation fire, and ever as the flames rise high and higher, with cries of agonizing glory still, all of that self burn up that burn up will, leaving the phoenix that no fire can slay, to spring from his own ashes kindled, nay, itself an inextinguishable spark of being now beneath earth ashes dark, transcending these at last itself transcends, and with the one eternal essence blends. The moths had long been exiled from the flame they worship, so to solemn council came, and voted one of them by lot be sent to find their idol. One was chosen, went, and after a long circuit in sheer gloom, seeing, he thought, the taper in a room, flew back at once to say so, but the chief of Mothistan slighted so slight belief, and sent another messenger, who flew up to the house, in at the window, through the flame itself, and back the message brings, and yet no sign of conflict on his wings. Then went a third, and spurred with true desire, plunging at once into the sacred fire, folded his wings within, till he became one colour and one substance with the flame. He only knew the flame who in it burned, and only he could tell, who ne'er to tell returned. After declaring what of this declared must be, that all who went should be prepared, from his high station ceased the Tajidar, and lo, the terrors that, when told afar, seemed but as shadows of a noonday sun, now that the talked of thing was to be done, lengthening into those of closing day, strode into utter darkness and dismay, like night on the hushed sea of feathers lay, late so elate, so terrible a track, endless or ending, never to come back, never to country, family or friend, in sooth no easy bow for birds to bend. Even while he spoke, how many wings and crests had slunk away to distant woods and nests, others again in preparation spent what little strength they had and never went, and others, after preparation due, when up the vale of that first valley drew, from whose waste wilderness of darkness blew a sarsar, whether edged of flames or snows, that through from root to tip their feathers froze. Up went a multitude that overhead a moment darkened, then on all sides fled, dwindling the world assembled caravan to less than half the number that began. Of those who fled not, some in dread and doubt sat without stirring, others who set out with frothy force or stupidly resigned, before a league flew off or fell behind. And howsoever the more brave and strong in courage, wing or wisdom pushed along, yet league by league the road was thicklier spread by the fast falling foliage of the dead, some spent with travel over wave and ground, scorched, frozen, dead for drought, or drinking, drowned, famished or poisoned with the food when found, by weariness or hunger or affright, seduced to stop or stray, become the bite of tiger howling round, or hissing snake, or crocodile that eyed them from the lake, or raving mad, or in despair self-slain, or slaying one another for a grain. Till of the mighty host that fledged the dome of heaven and floor of earth on leaving home, a handful reached and scrambled up the knees of Kaf, whose feet dip in the 7 seas. And of the few that up his forest sides of light and darkness where the presence hides, but 30 desperate draggled things, half dead, with scarce a feather on their wings, stunned, blinded, deafened with the crash and craze of rock and sea, collapsing in a blaze that struck the sun to cinder, fell upon the threshold of the everlasting One, with but enough life in each to cry on that which all absorbed, and suddenly forth flashed a winged harbinger of flame, and tongue of fire, and who, and whence they came, and why demanded, and the Tajidar for all the 30 answered him, We are those fractions of the sum of being, far disspent and foul disfigured, that once more strike for admission at the treasury door. To whom the angel answered, Know ye not that he you seek recks little who or what of quantity and kind, himself the fount of being universal needs no count, of all the drops o'erflowing from his urn, in what degree they issue or return? Then cried the spokesman, Be it even so, let us but see the fount from which we flow, and seeing lose ourselves therein, And lo, before the word was uttered, or the tongue of fire replied, or portal open flung, they were within. They were before the throne, before the majesty that sat thereon, and wrapped in so insufferable a blaze of glory as beat down their baffled gaze, which downward drooping fell upon a scroll that lightning-like flashed back on each the whole past half-forgotten story of his soul, like that which Yusuf in his glory gave his brethren as some writing he would have interpreted, and at a glance behold their own indenture for their brother sold. And so with these poor 30, who, abashed in memory, all laid bare in conscience last, by full confession and self-loathing flung the rags of carnal self that round them clung, and their old selves self-acknowledged and self-loathed, and in the soul's integrity reclothed, once more they ventured from the dust to raise their eyes up to the throne, into the blaze, and in the centre of the glory there beheld the figure of themselves, as 'twere transfigured, looking to themselves beheld the figure on the throne, and miracled, until their eyes themselves and that between did hesitate which seer was, which seen. They that they, another yet the same, individual yet one, from whom there came a voice of awful answer scarce discerned, from which to aspiration whose returned they scarcely knew, as when some men apart answer aloud the question in his heart: The sun of my perfection is a glass, wherein from seeing into being pass all who, reflecting as reflected, see themselves in me, and me in them, not me but all of me, that a contracted eye is comprehensive of infinity, nor yet themselves, no selves, but of the All, fractions from which they split and wither fall, as water lifted from the deep again falls back in individual drops of rain, then melts into the universal main. All you have been and seen and done and thought, not you but I have seen and been and wrought. I was the sin that from myself rebelled, I the remorse that toward myself compelled. I was the Tajidar who led the track, I was the little briar that pulled you back. Sin and contrition, retribution owed and cancelled, pilgrimage and road, was but myself, toward myself, and your arrival but myself at my own door, who in your fraction of myself beheld myself within the mirror myself hold to see myself in, and each part of me that sees himself, though drowned, shall ever see. Come, you lost atoms, to your centre draw, and be the eternal mirror that you saw. Rays that have wandered into darkness wide, return and back into your sun subside. This was the Parliament of Birds, and this the story of the host who went amiss, and of the few that better upshot found, which being now recounted, lo, the ground of speech fails under foot, but this to tell: their road is thine. Follow, and fare thee well. End of Farid ud-Din Attar's Bird Parliament, as translated by Edward Fitzgerald.
Discordance by Conrad Aiken, read for LibriVox.org by Philip Gould. Discordance 1. Bread and music. Music I heard with you was more than music, and bread I broke with you was more than bread. Now that I am without you, all is desolate. All that was once so beautiful is dead. Your hands once touched this table and this silver, and I have seen your fingers hold this glass. These things do not remember you, beloved, and yet your touch upon them will not pass. For it was in my heart you moved among them, and blessed them with your hands and with your eyes. And in my heart they will remember always, they knew you once, O beautiful and wise. 2. My heart has become as hard as a city street. The horses trample upon it, it sings like iron. All day long and all night long they beat, they ring like the hoofs of time. My heart has become as drab as a city park. The grass is worn with the feet of shameless lovers. A match is struck, there is kissing in the dark. The moon comes, pale with sleep. My heart is torn with the sound of raucous voices. They shout from the slums, from the streets, from the crowded places, and tunes from the hurdy-gurdy that coldly rejoices shoot arrows into my heart. 3. Dead Cleopatra lies in a crystal casket, wrapped and spiced by the cunningest of hands. Around her neck they have put a golden necklace. Her tatbebs, it is said, are worn with sands. Dead Cleopatra was once revered in Egypt. Warm-eyed she was, this princess of the south. Now she is old, and dry, and faded. With black bitumen they have sealed up her mouth. O sweet clean earth from whom the green blade cometh, when we are dead, my best beloved and I, close well above us, that we may rest forever, sending up grass and blossoms to the sky. 4. In the noisy street, where the sifted sunlight yellows the pallid faces, sudden I close my eyes, and on my eyelids feel from the far-off sea a cool, faint spray. A breath on my cheek from the tumbling breakers and foam, the hard sand shattered. Gulls in the high wind whistling, flashing waters, smoke from the flashing waters blown on rocks. And I know once more, O dearly beloved, that all these seas are between us, tumult and madness, desolate save for the seagulls, you on the farther shore, and I in this street. Conrad Aiken. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The End of the World by Gordon Bottomley. Read for LibriVox.org by Algy. The snow had fallen many nights and days. The sky was come upon the earth at last, sifting thinly down as endlessly as though within the system of blind planets something had been forgot or overdriven. The dawn now seemed neglected in the grey, where mountains were unbuilt, and shadowless trees rootlessly paused or hung upon the air. There was no wind, but now and then a sigh crossed that dry falling dust, and rifted it through crevices of slate and door and casement. Perhaps the new moon's time was even past. Outside, the first white twilights were too void, until a sheep called once as to a lamb, and tenderness crept everywhere from it. But now the flock must have strayed far away. The lights across the valley must be veiled, the smoke lost in the greyness or the dusk. For more than 3 days now the snow had thatched that cow-house roof, where it had ever melted with yellow stains from the beast's breath inside. But yet a dog howled there, though not quite lately. Someone passed down the valley, swift and singing, yes, with locks spreaded like a son of morning. But if he seemed too tall to be a man, it was that men had been so long unseen, or shapes loomed larger through a moving snow. And he was gone, and food had not been given him. When snow slid from an overweighted leaf, shaking the tree, it might have been a bird slipping in sleep or shelter, whirring wings. Yet never did bird fall out, save once a dead one, and in 2 days the snow had covered it. The dog had howled again, or thus it seemed, until a lean fox passed and cried no more. All was so safe indoors, where life went on, glad of the close enfolding snow. Oh, glad to be so safe and secret at its heart, watching the strangeness of familiar things. They knew not what dim hours went on, went by, for while they slept the clock stopped newly wound as the cold hardened. Once they watched the road, thinking to be remembered. Once they doubted if they had kept the sequence of the days, because they heard not any sound of bells. A butterfly, that hid until the spring under a ceiling's shadow, dropped, was dead. The coldness seemed more nigh, the coldness deepened as a sound deepens into silences. It was of earth and came not by the air. The earth was cooling and drew down the sky. The air was crumbling. There was no more sky. Rails of a broken bed charred in the grate, and when he touched the bars he thought the sting came from their heat. He could not feel such cold. She said, "Oh, do not sleep, heart, heart of mine, keep near me." "No, no, sleep. I will not lift his fallen quiet eyelids, although I know he would awaken then. He closed them thus but now of his own will. He can stay with me while I do not lift them." End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Epilogue by William Ernest Henley. Read for LibriVox.org by Bruce Kachuk. These to you now, oh, more than ever now, now that the ancient enemy has passed, and we two that are one, have seen a piece of perfect life turn to so ravishing a shape of death, the arch discomforter might well have smiled in pity and pride, even as he bore his lovely and innocent spoil from those home kingdoms he left desolate. Poor windlestraws, on the great, sullen, roaring pool of time and chance and change, I know. But they are yours, as I am, till we attain that end for which we make, we two that are one, a little exquisite ghost between us, smiling with the serenest eyes seen in this world, and calling still in that clear voice whose infinite subtleties of sweetness, thrilling back across the grave, break the poor heart to hear. Come, Dadsy, come! Mamma, how long, how long? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Flycatchers by Robert Bridges. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Sweet pretty fledglings, perched on the rail a row, expectantly happy, where you can watch below your parents are hunting in the meadow grasses all the gay morning to feed you with flies. You recall me a time 60 summers ago, when, a young chubby chap, I sat just so with others on a school form ranked in a row, not less eager and hungry than you, I trow, with intelligences agape and eyes aglow, while an authoritative old wiseacre stood over us, and from a desk fed us with flies. Dead flies, such as littered the library south window, that buzzed at the panes until they fell stiff-baked on the sill, or are rolled up asleep with the blinds at sunrise, or wafered flat in a shrunken folio. A dry biped it was, nurtured likewise on skins and skeletons, stale from top to toe, with all manner of rubbish and all manner of lies. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
In the Placid Summer Midnight by William Ernest Henley. Read for LibriVox.org by Bruce Kachuk. In the placid summer midnight, under the drowsy sky. I seem to hear in the stillness the moths go glimmering by. One by one from the windows the lights have all been sped. Never a blind looks conscious. The street is asleep in bed. But I come where a living casement laughs luminous and wide. I hear the song of a piano break in a sparkling tide, and I feel in the waltz that frolics and warbles swift and clear a sudden sense of shelter and friendliness and cheer, a sense of tinkling glasses, of love and laughter and light. The piano stops, and the window stares blank out into the night. The blind goes out, and I wander to the old unfriendly sea, the lonelier for the memory that walks like a ghost with me. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. Read by Linda Olsen Fitak for LibriVox.org. Se io credesse che mia risposta fosse a persona che mai tornasse al mondo, questa fiamma staria senza più scorse. Ma perché io ceghiammi di questo fondo non torno vivo alcun? Se odo il vero, senza tema d'infamia ti rispondo. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient, etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair, with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin! Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all. Have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt-ends of my days and ways? And how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all. Arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl, and should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say, I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt-sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening, sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor, here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it, after all? After the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me? Would it have been worth while to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all? If one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. And would it have been worth it, after all? Would it have been worth while, after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this, and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worth while if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window, should say, that is not it at all, That is not what I meant at all. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress, start a scene or two. Advise the prince, no doubt, an easy tool. Deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times indeed, almost ridiculous, almost at times, the fool. I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back, when the wind blows the waters white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Oft in the Stilly Night by Thomas Moore. Read for LibriVox.org by Winston Tharp. Oft in the stilly night, ere slumber's chain has bound me, fond memory brings the light of other days around me. The smiles, the tears of boyhood's years, the words of love then spoken, the eyes that shone, now dimmed and gone, the cheerful hearts now broken. Thus in the stilly night, ere slumber's chain has bound me, sad memory brings the light of other days around me. When I remember all the friends so linked together I've seen around me fall like leaves in wintry weather, I feel like one who threads alone some banquet hall deserted, whose lights are fled, whose garlands dead, and all but he departed. Thus in the stilly night, ere slumber's chain has bound me, sad memory brings the light of other days around me. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Old Germany by Walther von der Vogelweide, 1170 to 1230. Read for LibriVox.org. In many foreign lands I've been, and knights and ladies there have seen, but here alone I find my rest. Old Germany is still the best. Some other lands have pleased me well, but here, 'tis here I choose to dwell. German men have virtues rare, and German maids are angels fair. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
O Me, O Life by Walt Whitman. Read for LibriVox.org by Phil Schempf. O me, O life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, of myself forever reproaching myself, for who more foolish than I, and who more faithless? Of eyes that vainly crave the light, of the objects mean, of the struggle ever renewed, of the poor results of all, of the plodding and sordid crowds I see around me, of the empty and useless years of the rest, with the rest me intertwined. The question, O me, so sad recurring, what good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you will contribute a verse. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
On a Dead Field Flower by John Reed. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. Torn by some careless hand from thy mother's breast, by gentle breezes fanned thy little leaves to rest. Here dost thou lie, forsaken, no more shalt thou awaken, to gladden with thy beauty the wanderer oppressed. No more at early morn, when the lark's gay song, through grove and meadow borne, calls his merry mates along, shall thy tiny arms, outspreading, their grateful odour shedding, give silent, speaking welcome to nature's joyous throng. Peaceful and calm thy sleep, thy life's race run, thou hadst no cause to weep, no duty left undone. Sweet little withered blossom, how many a blighted bosom would fain repose as softly beneath a summer's sun. How many a child of care, won by thy power, might raise his voice in prayer, taught by thee, little flower. Ah, surely thou wast given a gracious boon from heaven, to throw its charm on sinful earth for one short blissful hour. Farewell, I may not stay, thy frail, drooping form heeds not the sun's fierce ray, nor winter's frowning storm. Like thee, kind hearts have perished by those it should have cherished, and held the shield of friendship to shelter them from harm. Like thee I soon must fade, and 'neath the sky, lifeless and cold, be laid. But though I claim no sigh, though no fond heart may miss me, when death's pale lips shall kiss me, if my short life be pure as thine, I need not fear to die. May 1857. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Pomona by William Morris, read for LibriVox.org by Newgatenovelist. I am the ancient apple queen, as once I was, so am I now, for evermore a hope unseen betwixt the blossom and the bough. Ah, where's the river's hidden gold, and where the windy grave of Troy? Yet come I as I came of old, from out the heart of summer's joy. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Preludes by T.S. Eliot. Read for LibriVox.org by Dafni. 1. The winter's evening settles down with smells of sticks in passageways. 6 o'clock. The burnt-out ends of smoky days, and now a gusty sour wraps the grimy scraps of withered leaves across your feet, and newspapers from vacant lots. The sours beat on empty blinds and chimney pots, and at the corner of the street a lonely cab horse streams and stamps, and then the lighting of the lamps. 2. The morning comes to consciousness of faint stale smells of beer from the sawdust-trampled street, with all the muddy feet that press to early coffee stands. With the other masquerades the time resumes, one thinks of all the hands that are raising dingy shades in 1,000 furnished rooms. 3. You tossed a blanket from the bed, you lay upon your back and waited, You dozed, and what's the night revealing the thousand sordid images of which your soul is constituted? They flickered against the ceiling, and when all the world came back, and the light crept up between the shutters, and you heard the sparrows in the gutters, you had such a vision of the street, as the street hardly understands, sitting along the bed's edge where you curled the papers from your hair and clasped the yellow soles of feet in the palms of both soiled hands. 4. His soul stretched tight across the skies that fade behind a city block, or trampled by insistent feet at 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock, and short square fingers stuffing pipes and evening newspapers, and eyes assured of certain certainties, the conscience of a blackened street, impatient to assume the world. I am moved by fancies that are curled around these images and cling, the notion of some infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering thing. Wipe your hand across your mouth and laugh. The worlds revolve like ancient women gathering fuel in vacant lots. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Rainy Day by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Read for LibriVox.org by Ian King. The day is cold and dark and dreary. It rains, and the wind is never weary. The vine still clings to the mouldering wall, but at every gust the dead leaves fall, and the day is dark and dreary. My life is cold and dark and dreary. It rains, and the wind is never weary. My thoughts still cling to the mouldering past, but the hopes of youth fall thick in the blast, and the days are dark and dreary. Be still, sad heart, and cease repining. Behind the clouds is the sun still shining. Thy fate is the common fate of all. Into each life some rain must fall. Some days must be dark and dreary. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Recognition by Arthur Adams. Read for LibriVox.org by Newgatenovelist. Swift was our glance as a stab, meeting and severing thus. You flashing past in a cab, I on the top of a bus. So I have found you at last. This moment opened a door, flooding our souls with the past. So I have known you before. You are the woman I sought age after age tirelessly. Fierce to possess you we fought, all the dead egos in me. As in those lives far removed, once more our pathways have crossed. Yours the one soul that I loved, longed for, and reached for, and lost. You are the same. I recall all the desire and the strife. You are the one in them all. I have loved life after life. Lost you, I treasured your lips, ever remembered your eyes. Death after death might eclipse, I with each dawn recognize. So that I know you are you, choose you so surely from all. You have remembered me too, your new self strives to recall. Swift that old hunger for you woke in me unreconciled, and in that moment I knew, and in that moment you smiled. For, though our loving the grave closed in forgetfulness, yet keepsakes, mementos you gave, trusting I should not forget, till I am but as a scroll telling an old tale anew, all this rich garment my soul patterned with memories of you. Eons ago we first met, till in star splendour we mate, eons must fade and forget, drowsing eternity wait. And in those long years aloof, lives upon lives yet must run, till I, the warp, you, the woof, richly are woven in one. So, though the time may be late when we together are brought, these two are masters of fate, he who seeks, she who is sought. And in that future, at last, I shall remember you thus. You in a cab drifting past, I on the top of a bus. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Ride on the Ice by Esaias Tegner. Translated from Swedish by Thomas and Martha Holcomb. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. The Ride on the Ice. King Ring to a banquet his queen would take, the ice like a mirror overspread the lake. Go not on the ice, said the stranger bold, it may break, and the bath is too deep and cold. The king, answered Ring, is not easily drowned. Whoever is fearful, let him go round. The stranger was angered and sullen frowned, then quickly his skates to his feet he bound. The sledge horse sets out, he is strong and free, his nostrils are flaming, so glad is he. Strike out, cried the monarch, my charger good, and show if you are of the Sleipner blood. As swift as a storm on the sea his speed, the prayers of the queen does the king not heed. The stranger in mail on his skates is not still, but passes them swiftly whenever he will. He writes many runes on the ice besides, and over her name lovely Ingeborg rides. They swiftly speed onward, the lake to span, but under them lurketh the treacherous Ran. Her silvery roof in a trice she breaks, and catches the sled in the hole she makes. The cheeks of the beautiful queen turn pale, then comes like a whirlwind the skater in mail. He buries his skate in the ice to clasp the steed's flowing mane in his iron grasp. With one single effort his arm he swings, and charger and sled to the firm ice springs. That stroke, said Ring, was a noble one, not Fridtjof the Strong could have better done. So they all returned to the house of the king, the stranger remaining until the spring. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. This is a LibriVox recording by Rebecca S. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark, that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out, even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. End of sonnet. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Sonnet 18 by William Shakespeare. This is a LibriVox recording by Rebecca S. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. End of Sonnet. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Sonnet 73 by William Shakespeare. This is a LibriVox recording by Rebecca S. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs, where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed, whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well, which thou must leave ere long. End of Sonnet. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain.
Spring by Jared Manley Hopkins. Read for LibriVox.org by Winston Tharp. Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds and wheels shoot long and lovely and lush. Thrush's eggs look little low heavens, and thrush through the echoing timber does so rinse and ring the ear, it strikes like lightnings to hear him sing. The glassy pear tree leaves and blooms, they brush the descending blue. That blue is all in a rush with richness. The racing lambs, too, have fair their fling. What is all this juice and all this joy? A strain of the earth's sweet being in the beginning in Eden garden. Have, get, before it cloy, before it cloud Christ Lord, and sour with sinning innocent mind, and Mayday and girl and boy, most, O maid's child, thy choice, and worthy the winning. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Sunset by Theodore Maynard. Read for LibriVox.org by Thomas Peter. I have seen death in many a varied guise, cruel and tender, rude and beautiful, looking through windows in a young child's eyes, stealing as soft as shadows in a pool, falling a sudden arrow of dismay, blown on a bugle with an iron note, the slow and gentle progress of decay, the taking of a strong man by the throat. I have seen flowers wither, and the leaf of lusty summer burn to hectic red. But ah, that splendid death untouched by grief, the sun with glad and golden-visaged head, superbly standing on his deadly pyre, and sinking in a sea of jeweled fire. February 10th, 1918. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To a Child by Louise Imogen Guinea. Read for LibriVox.org by Ian King. Dear Owain, when you are minded to gather the perfect thing, over Abergavenny climb in the evening. I have seen where Orchis dances, a saraband with the spring, where Samphire leans to ocean and shakes in the word he saith, or the brood of the peasant ragweed, innocent, sweet of breath, runs with a wild Welsh river that never has heard of death. Where thrift, with a foot shell-tinted, on the dark coast road delays, and foxglove flames in a ruin, and campion meekly lays on a crag's uneven shoulder her satiny cheek for days. Well, these in their mortal beauty, and these in their youth abound. But over Abergavenny, past sunset hour, I found, O holy grail of a flower, the sun on the hilltop ground. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To Oliver Wendell Holmes by Edward P. Guild. Read for LibriVox.org by Sonia. To Oliver Wendell Holmes, on his departure for Europe. Good doctor, what has put it in your head to sail away across the ocean blue? Have you got tired of Boston, or instead, do you mistrust that we are tired of you? You wanted to see England, and you thought that you might go for once in 50 years. Well, your own way, just make your visit short, so here's bon voyage, and also a few tears. We hope that you will have a joyful time, meet hosts of friends, and sit at many a feast, and when, with all your wit and all your rhyme, you once are back in this your native clime, don't ask to sail again off to the east for, well, for 5 times 50 years at least. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
To the Grammarians, Why He Writes Wantonly, by Johannes Secundus, 1511 to 1536. Read for LibriVox.org. You ask why thus I write in wanton strains? Why love in every verse luxuriant reigns? Because I would not have dull pedants cumber my light effusions with their learned lumber. If lives of sainted men inspired my lays, or if I sang heroic Caesar's praise, what notes, oppressive weight, must I endure? What comments, obvious readings to obscure? What tedious stuff conceived by addled brains, to boys the certain cause of future pains? But while on kisses I employ my song, kisses or moist or dry, or short or long, me summon the unmarried youth to aid, me bent on joy the newly married maid, me the gay bard whom lighter studies please, wisely indulging in delicious ease. But from these sports sour scholiasts abstain, these never with unhallowed hands profane, nor turn to grief what we to mirth design, lest punished for some soft perverted line, wronged innocents, with tears unjustly shed, wish the cold earth lie heavy on my head. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
We live in deeds, not years, in thoughts, not breaths, by Philip James Bailey. Read for LibriVox.org by Phil Schempf. We live in deeds, not years, in thoughts, not breaths, in feelings, not in figures on a dial. We should count time by heart-throbs. He most lives who thinks most, feels the noblest, acts the best. And he whose heart beats quickest lives the longest, lives in 1 hour more than in years do some, whose fat blood sleeps as it slips along their veins. Life's but a means unto an end, that end, beginning, mean, and end to all things, God. The dead have all the glory of the world. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
What is to come, we know not. By William Ernest Henley. Read for LibriVox.org by Bruce Kachuk. What is to come, we know not. But we know that what has been was good to show, better to hide, and best of all to bear. We are the masters of the days that were. We have lived, we have loved, we have suffered, even so. Shall we not take the ebb, who had the flow? Life was our friend. Now if it be our foe, dear, though it spoil and break us, need we care what is to come? Let the great winds their worst and wildest blow, or the gold weather round us mellow slow. We have fulfilled ourselves, and we can dare, and we can conquer, though we may not share in the rich quiet of the afterglow. What is to come? End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Windy Night by Aileen Kilmer. Read for LibriVox.org by Ian King. You say you love to hear the wind, like brazen trumpets in the night, that all its martial panoply wakes in your soul a wild delight. You like to hear upon the roof the silver lances of the rain, and see the birches' cavalry go sweeping past the window pane, to see tall chestnuts fall like towers, while all our happy house is still, and like a charge with bayonets the cedar trees rush up the hill. But I lie trembling in the night, as dark and wild as night can be, remembering songs that you have made, till through the night you come to me. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Written in Edinburgh by Arthur Henry Hallam. Read for LibriVox.org by Newgatenovelist. Even thus, methinks, a city reared should be, yea, an imperial city, that might hold 5 times 100 noble towns in fee, and either with their might of Babel old, or the rich Roman pomp of empery might stand compare, highest in arts enrolled, highest in arms, brave tenement for the free, who never crouch to thrones or sin for gold. Thus should her towers be raised, with vicinage of clear bold hills that curve her very streets, as if to vindicate, mid choicest seats of art, abiding nature's majesty and the broad sea beyond, in calm or rage chainless alike, and teaching liberty. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.